The first thing David Reeves noticed when consciousness returned was that he couldn't feel his left arm. The second thing was that gravity felt wrong, not absent, not heavy, just wrong, like someone had adjusted the universe's settings by 15% and forgotten to mention it. The third thing, and arguably the most concerning, was that he appeared to be strapped to a table that hummed with a frequency that made his teeth ache. He tried to open his eyes. One cooperated. The other felt like it had been glued shut, possibly with whatever substance was making the left side of his face feel like tenderized meat. The ceiling above him pulsed with bioluminescent panels that cycled through colors no human lighting engineer would ever approve. Cyan to violet to something that hurt to look at, then back to cyan. His functional eye watered. Somewhere in the back of his fragmenting mind he thought, well, this is definitely not the medical bay on the Covenant asterisk. Memory came in jagged pieces. The diplomatic mission, the threshold. That moment when Lieutenant Parks had looked at the sensor readouts and said, very calmly, "Those aren't asteroids." The way Captain Rodriguez's voice had cracked when she ordered all hands to escape pods. The sickening lurch as his pods separated from the dying ship. Then nothing but the sound of his own breathing and the emergency beacon's monotonous chirp, until that too had died, leaving him alone in the dark with a cracked radiation shield and the growing certainty that he'd made a terrible career choice. Someone had found him, obviously. The question was who, and whether he should be grateful or terrified. He tested the restraints. They didn't budge, but they didn't hurt either, some kind of field that pressed him gently but absolutely to the platform. Considerate captors, he thought. That's either very good or very bad asterisk. The door opened with a sound like a sigh. David tried to turn his head. The restraint field permitted about 30 degrees of movement, enough to see her enter. His brain, still cataloging impossibilities, added another to the list. She looked human, almost perfectly human. Young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a style that was practical bordering on severe. She wore something between a uniform and medical scrubs, pale blue with subtle patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Then she turned her head, and he saw her ears. They swept back from her skull in elegant points, longer than human ears, with a slight curve that gave them an almost architectural quality. The rest of her face remained focused on a tablet-like device in her hands, her expression absorbed in whatever data it displayed. Quaveran asterisk, David thought, and his heart rate spiked. The device she carried chirped in response. She looked up at him then, and her eyes widened slightly. "You're awake," she said, and David's translator implant, if it was even still functioning after everything, rendered her words with a slight accent he couldn't place. "That's earlier than expected. How do you feel?" David opened his mouth. His throat felt like he'd been gargling broken glass. "Like I lost an argument with a star," he croaked. "Where?" "Research Station Calith 9, Quaveran Territorial Space," she said, already moving closer with her device. She waved it over his torso, and it emitted a series of tones that apparently meant something to her. Her frown deepened with each pass. "You were retrieved from a damaged escape pod approximately 72 hours ago. Your ship was identified as Human Diplomatic Vessel CNS Covenant. Are you military or civilian?" "Technically military," David said. "Practically, I fix the coffee maker and pretend to understand the navigation computer. Lieutenant David Reeves, Communications Specialist." He paused. "Is it standard procedure to have this conversation while I'm strapped to a table, or is this the premium captivity experience?" Something flickered in her expression, surprise, maybe amusement. "The restraint field is for your protection. You sustained significant injuries during pod failure. Internal bleeding, radiation exposure, fractures. Moving without stabilization could worsen your condition." "Fantastic. How bad are we talking?" "Scale of 1 to should have stayed in bed." She tilted her head, and David wondered if that gesture meant the same thing for Quaverans as it did for humans. "Your species has concerning fragility," she said, which wasn't exactly an answer. The radiation exposure alone should have. She stopped, seemed to reconsider. You're stable for now. That's reassuring in a way that's not reassuring at all. David tried to smile, but his face protested. I don't suppose I could get some water, or whatever counts as water here. I'm not picky. I once drank recycled coolant on a dare, so I'm pretty much qualified to drink anything. That was inadvisable, she said, but she moved to a panel on the wall and retrieved something that looked like a flask. She touched a control, and the restraint field adjusted, allowing him to lift his head slightly. She held the flask to his lips carefully. The liquid tasted like water filtered through aluminum foil and optimism. David swallowed gratefully. Thank you, he said. I'm going to go ahead and assume you're a doctor, which makes you the first person in 3-star systems to show concern about my continued existence. I appreciate that. Nurse, she corrected. Lyria Thelvarin, and my concern is professional obligation, not personal sentiment. I'll take it, David studied her face. So, Nurse Lyria, what's the prognosis? Am I going to make it to my court-martial, or should I start composing my last words? I'm thinking something profound like, I told you that Nav route was sketchy. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes softened fractionally. Your condition is serious. Human physiology responds poorly to theta band radiation. Your cellular regeneration is significantly slower than quaveran baseline, and your pod's failed shielding exposed you to levels that would be harmful even to my species. But I'm alive. Yes. That sounds like a yes but situation. Lyria set down her device and looked at him directly. Her eyes were dark, almost black, with gold flecks that caught the pulsing light. You're deteriorating, she said quietly. Without intervention, you have perhaps 70 hours remaining. With standard treatment protocols for alien subjects, I can extend that to 200 hours. Maybe. The room suddenly felt colder. Well, David said, forcing lightness into his voice, that's definitely in the should-have-stayed-in-bed range. He took a breath, tasted metal and fear. What about non-standard treatment? You said standard protocols like there's an exciting alternative. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, David saw something he hadn't expected. Uncertainty. On her face, on a quaveran medical professional in her own facility, uncertainty looked like a crack in the universe. There may be options, she said finally, but they carry significant risk. Riskier than definitely dying. Different risks, unknown risks. David laughed, which hurt, which made him laugh harder in the slightly unhinged way of someone whose day had gone comprehensively wrong. Nurse Lyria, I flew through a battle in a diplomatic vessel with about as much armor as a paper bag. Got shot into space in a faulty escape pod, and woke up on an alien station, probably surrounded by people who'd be perfectly happy if I stopped being their problem. Unknown risks sound downright quaint. She studied him for a long moment, then she picked up her device and turned toward the door. I'll review your case, she said. Try to rest. Wait, but she was already gone, and David was alone again with the humming table and the pulsing lights, and the growing certainty that his survival depended entirely on the compassion of a woman, who just told him compassion wasn't part of her job description. He closed his working eye and tried to find something funny about that. He failed, but he kept trying anyway, because the alternative was thinking about those 70 hours, and that math didn't lead anywhere he wanted to go. Lyria had been staring at the vial for 20 minutes. Which was approximately 19 minutes longer than any rational person should stare at a small container of luminescent blue liquid. The Synthesis 7 compound caught the laboratory's dim lighting and seemed to glow with its own internal conviction, as if it knew exactly what it was supposed to do and was just waiting for someone brave enough, or foolish enough, to let it try. She set it down on the counter with more force than necessary. The vial didn't break, which was disappointing. Breaking it would have made the decision for her. You're doing that thing again, said a voice from the doorway. Lyria didn't turn around. What thing? The thing where you stand very still and radiate disapproval at inanimate objects. It's deeply unsettling. Researcher Calvin entered the lab with the casual confidence of someone who'd known her since university and had long since lost any fear of her irritation. He was taller than most Quiverans, with silver threading through his dark hair and the slightly manic energy of someone who'd had too much caffeine or not enough sleep. Possibly both. Let me guess. The human. His name is David Reeves. The human named David Reeves, then. How's our unexpected guest doing? Dying, Lyria said flatly. 70 hours, give or take. The theta band radiation is breaking down his cellular structure faster than his body can compensate. He's essentially bleeding to death at a molecular level. Kale leaned against the counter, carefully not touching anything. He'd learned that lesson after the incident with the Velasian culture samples. And you're considering using that, he gestured at the vial, because you've decided standard protocols are insufficient. Standard protocols are designed to stabilize, not heal. They'll keep him alive long enough for command to decide what to do with him. Which is the point of standard protocols. Lyria finally turned to face him. He's 26 years old, Kale. He fixes communication systems. He made a joke about drinking coolant. He's not a soldier, not really. He's just someone who was in the wrong place when everything went wrong. That describes approximately half the casualties in any conflict, Kale said, but his tone was gentle. Lyria, I know where this is coming from, but saving one human won't bring back Talvin. The name hung in the air between them. Her brother. The border skirmish near Threshold Station. The way Command had explained, with great professional courtesy, that his ship had been obliterated so completely they couldn't even recover remains for the traditional ceremonies. This isn't about Talvin, Lyria said, but they both knew she was lying. Then what is it about? She picked up the vial again, held it up to the light. Do you remember what Professor Shale used to say about the oath? Preserve life when you possess the skill to do so, regardless of the political convenience of death. Kale quoted. She also used to say that idealism was a luxury afforded to those who never had to make real decisions. She said both things could be true simultaneously. Shale was brilliantly contradictory. Kale moved closer, studying the compound. Synthesis 7 has shown remarkable results in Quiveran trials. Accelerated cellular regeneration, enhanced healing capacity, even some improvement in neural pathway efficiency. But we've never tested it on a human. Their physiology is so different, more chaotic somehow. They heal messier, think louder, adapt in ways we don't fully understand. Which means it might work. Or it might kill him in new and exciting ways we haven't imagined yet. Kale paused. What did Commander Thrace say when you requested authorization? Lyria's silence was answer enough. You didn't ask her. I asked. She denied the request, said he's strategic property pending evaluation of his intelligence value. Well, he did come from a diplomatic vessel in restricted space. There are procedures. He's a person, Kale, not property. I'm not arguing with you. I'm explaining Command's perspective. He rubbed his face tiredly. What do you need from me? Other than moral support for what I suspect is going to be a profoundly unauthorized medical intervention. I need to know what happens if it goes wrong. Kale pulled up a holographic display from his wrist interface, flicking through data with practiced efficiency. Best case scenario, his body rejects the compound and we're back where we started. Worst case, the cellular rewriting cascades incorrectly and causes catastrophic organ failure. Middle scenarios involve anything from minor mutations to complete genetic restructuring. How minor are minor mutations? That could be as simple as enhanced healing that persists after treatment. Could be physiological changes that make him incompatible with his own species' medical protocols. Could be psychological effects. The compound works at a fundamental level, rewriting cellular instructions. Who knows what that does to a human nervous system? Lyria felt something cold settle in her chest. He could survive but become something different. Possibly, probably. The compound doesn't just heal Lyria, it optimizes. It takes whatever genetic template it finds and enhances it according to its programming. For Quiverans, that's fine. We designed it based on our own biology. For a human, he shrugged, we're in uncharted territory. But he'd be alive. He'd be something. Whether he'd thank you for it is a different question. Kale closed the display. Look, I'm not going to stop you. We both know you've already decided. But you need to understand what you're risking. Not just his life, yours. If this goes wrong, if he dies or worse, Command will want someone to blame. And you'll be the obvious choice. I know. And you're doing it anyway. I took an oath. We all took an oath. Most of us have learned when to bend it for practical reasons. He smiled, tired and sad. But that's why you're a better person than me. Just promise you'll be careful. And maybe document everything. In case you need to prove you weren't conducting mad science for entertainment purposes. That's reassuring advice. I contain multitudes. Kale moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, if positions were reversed, if a human doctor had the chance to save a dying Quiveran with untested treatment, I'd want them to try. Even if it was risky. Even if it was unauthorized. Some things matter more than following procedures. After he left, Lyria returned to staring at the vial. The compound swirled slightly, responsive to temperature and movement, alive in its own way. She thought about David Reeves, strapped to a medical platform in the next wing, probably cracking jokes to himself because humor was apparently how humans process terror. She thought about Talvin, who would never crack another joke, who existed now only in memory and ceremonies she couldn't perform without remains to honor. She thought about the oath she'd taken in the halls of Veshara, speaking words thousands of years old, in a voice that shook with conviction she'd been certain would never waver. Then she picked up the vial, checked its molecular stability one final time, and began preparing the injection protocol. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. Some distant part of her mind expected uncertainty to manifest physically, but her fingers moved with steady precision, loading the compound into a delivery system calibrated for Quiveran physiology. She'd need to adjust the dosage, account for the differences in human cellular density, compensate for the unpredictable variables in their immune response. The mathematics of mercy, she thought. Calculating exactly how much unauthorized healing to administer. Her terminal chimed, a message from Commander Thrace requesting an updated status report on the human prisoner. Lyria ignored it. She had approximately 6 hours before the night cycle when station activity would be at its lowest. 6 hours to finalize the calculations, to triple-check her work, to talk herself out of it or commit fully. She looked at the compound again. It pulsed with bioluminescent promise, beautiful and dangerous, like everything that offered hope at the price of certainty. Well, she said to the empty laboratory, Professor Shale did always say that idealism was impractical. Then she smiled, just slightly, and began adjusting the dosage parameters. If she was going to violate every protocol Command held sacred, she might as well do it with precision. The station's night cycle brought a quality of silence that David found profoundly unnerving. Not actual silence. There were still the omnipresent hums and clicks of a functioning space station, the distant whoosh of atmosphere recyclers, the occasional metallic groan of hull stress. But the absence of footsteps, voices, the general bustle of people going about their business, made him feel like he'd been left behind in a place that had moved on without him. He'd been trying to sleep, which was optimistic considering the circumstances. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind helpfully provided a highlight reel of recent catastrophes, now with added speculation about his imminent cellular dissolution. He'd tried counting backwards from 1,000. He'd tried reciting the periodic table. He'd tried remembering the lyrics to every song he'd ever known, which had gotten him through exactly 2.5 verses of something his mother used to sing before his brain had given up and returned to contemplating mortality. The door opened with that same sighing sound, and David's working eye snapped open. Lyria entered carrying a small metallic case and an expression of determined calm that immediately made David suspicious. He'd seen that look before, usually on the faces of medical personnel right before they did something unpleasant, and insisted it was for his own good. "It's the middle of the night," he said. "This is either a rescue or something I'm really not going to enjoy. Please tell me it's a rescue." "It's 300 station time," she said, moving to the medical platform with purposeful steps. "And this is a treatment. The kind of treatment that happens at 300 with nobody else around. That's usually a bad sign in the entertainment hollows I've watched." She set down the case and began entering commands into the medical platform's interface. The restraint field adjusted slightly, allowing him more range of movement while keeping him stable. "Your condition has deteriorated faster than projected. I'm advancing your treatment schedule." "Is that medical talk for 'you're dying faster than expected' surprise?" "Yes." David appreciated the honesty even as it made his heart rate spike. The platform chirped in response to his elevated vital signs. "Okay. So what's the plan? Magic space medicine, experimental procedure, therapeutic optimism?" Lyria opened the case. Inside, secured in a cushioned slot, was a vial of something that glowed with soft blue light. It looked exactly like the kind of thing that either cured you completely or turned you into a cautionary tale. "That looks either very good or very bad," David said. "I'm getting mixed signals from the ominous glowing." "It's called Synthesis 7, a regenerative compound derived from deep space organisms. It accelerates cellular healing by rewriting base-level genetic instructions." She began preparing an injection apparatus with practiced efficiency. "It's shown successful results in Quiveran trials." "Quiveran trials," David repeated. "And how many human trials has it had?" She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "Ah, so I'd be the first. That's exciting in a way that makes me want to reconsider my life choices, except I'm running out of life to reconsider. The alternative is waiting for standard treatment protocols to slowly fail." Lyria looked at him directly, and in the dim lighting her eyes seemed darker, more serious. "This gives you a chance. I can't promise it will work. I can't promise there won't be complications, but I can promise you'll die without it." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds downright appealing." David watched her hands move with careful precision, loading the compound. "I'm guessing your commanding officer didn't authorize this midnight miracle cure." "No, so you're risking your career, probably violating several regulations, and definitely going to be in trouble if this goes wrong." "Why?" Lyria paused, her finger hovering over the final activation control. "Because I took an oath to preserve life when I have the skill to do so, and because you made a joke about drinking coolant, which suggests a survival instinct even if it's deeply misguided." Despite everything, David laughed. It hurt his ribs, but it felt necessary. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my life choices. Okay, Nurse Lyria, let's do some unauthorized medicine. What do I need to know?" "The injection will be uncomfortable. The compound works quickly. You should feel effects within minutes. Cellular regeneration, reduced pain, stabilization of vital functions." She moved closer, the injection apparatus ready. "There may also be unexpected responses. Human physiology is significantly different from Quiveran. The compound was designed for our biology, not yours." "Unexpected responses? That's wonderfully vague. Are we talking extra toes or full-body horror?" "Unknown. You're very honest for someone trying to convince me to take experimental alien drugs. Would you prefer I lie?" "Honestly, a little bit, yes." David took a breath which still hurt but less than yesterday. "Progress. But I appreciate the integrity. And since my options are definite death or possible weird transformation, I'm going with option 2. Hit me with the glowing blue science juice." Lyria positioned the injection apparatus against his arm, the one that still had feeling. This will be cold first, then burning. Try not to move. The famous last words before every good medical disaster. I'm ready, or not ready. Is anyone ever really ready for? The injection interrupted his rambling. Cold hit first, exactly as promised, spreading up his arm like liquid ice. Then the burning started, and David's attempt at brave humor evaporated. It felt like someone had replaced his blood with molten wire, like every nerve was firing simultaneously, like his cells were being individually informed of new management, and they were not happy about the reorganization. He tried not to scream. He mostly succeeded. What emerged was more of a strained wheeze that sounded vaguely interrogative. "Breathe," Lyria said, her hand on his shoulder. "The initial integration is most intense. It will stabilize." David breathed, or tried to. His lungs felt like they were learning to be lungs for the first time, remembering the basic concept of oxygen exchange, but having to figure out the practical application from scratch. His heart was doing something arrhythmic and concerning. The platform was making alarmed noises that suggested his vital signs had gone on an unauthorized adventure. Then something shifted. The pain didn't disappear so much as transform. It became information. He could feel his fractured arm knitting itself back together, could sense his damaged organs recalibrating, could perceive the radiation damage being systematically erased like someone was editing a document and removing all the errors. It was deeply weird and completely fascinating and slightly horrifying all at once. David's voice sounded strange to his own ears, clearer somehow. "That's really something. I can feel it working. I can feel everything working." "Is that normal?" Lyria was studying her diagnostic device with an expression of intense concentration. "Your cellular regeneration rate has increased by 300%. Neural activity is elevated but stable. Radiation markers are decreasing rapidly." She looked at him with something that might have been wonder or concern. "How do you feel?" "Like someone turned up all my settings and forgot to include an instruction manual." David flexed his previously broken arm experimentally. It moved without pain, without the grinding sensation of damaged bone. "This is incredible, also terrifying, incredibly terrifying. Your vital signs are stabilizing outside normal parameters for both human and Quaveran physiology. You're generating readings I've never seen." "Is that bad?" "It's unprecedented." "You're very good at non-answers that sound like answers." She almost smiled. "You're very good at jokes during medical crises." "It's a defense mechanism. My therapist said it was healthier than my previous defense mechanism, which was pretending problems didn't exist." David sat up slightly. The restraint field had loosened, responding to his improved condition. "So what happens now? Do I glow in the dark, develop telepathy, spontaneously learn to speak Quaveran?" "Unknown. The compound continues integrating for approximately 72 hours. We'll need to monitor your progression carefully." Lyria began documenting on her device, her fingers moving rapidly. "You should rest. Your body needs to process the changes." "Rest, right, because I'm definitely going to be able to sleep after being biologically renovated." But exhaustion was already creeping in, heavy and undeniable. Whatever the compound was doing required energy, and his body was suddenly very interested in shutting down non-essential functions. "Lyria." She looked up from her documentation. "Thank you for the unauthorized medicine and the honesty, and for not letting me die alone on a space station where everything hums at annoying frequencies." "You're welcome," she said quietly. "Try to sleep, I'll be monitoring." David's eye closed, both eyes actually, which was an improvement. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness claimed him was Lyria's voice, barely a whisper, carrying words that sounded like prayer or confession or promise. Humans shouldn't survive this. But he was surviving, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, something new was being written into the fundamental code of what he was. David woke to the sensation of being fundamentally rearranged. Not painfully, exactly, but with the distinct impression that someone had taken his entire existence apart, reorganized it according to a filing system he didn't quite understand, and put it back together with a few pieces in slightly different places. He felt more efficient, which was a deeply strange thing to feel. The restraint field was gone. He sat up without difficulty, without pain, without the screaming protest of injured tissue. His body moved with a fluidity that felt borrowed from someone more athletic. The room's pulsing lights no longer hurt his eyes. In fact, he could see gradations in the color spectrum he was reasonably certain humans weren't supposed to perceive. Lyria sat in a chair against the wall, her diagnostic device in her lap, asleep in the uncomfortable way of medical professionals who'd forgotten to go off duty. Her ears twitched slightly, responding to some dream stimulus, and David felt an unexpected warmth of affection for this woman who'd risked everything to save a stranger. He also felt her exhaustion like a tangible thing, a weight in the air between them, which was impossible, except apparently it wasn't anymore. "You're projecting concern," Lyria said without opening her eyes. "It's distracting." David blinked. "I'm projecting what now?" She opened her eyes and sat up, instantly alert in that way medical people managed. "Emotional resonance. It's a Quiverian trait. We can sense strong emotional states in proximity. Useful for medical diagnosis and social cohesion. Humans don't typically have it." "Well, I'm getting some very clear signals that you're exhausted and worried and trying to hide both behind professional competence." David paused. "That's new. That's very new. Should I be concerned about my sudden development of alien empathy?" "Unknown. It's one of several changes." She pulled up her device, and David could see the fatigue in the set of her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands. "Your cellular structure has stabilized in a hybrid configuration. You're healing at approximately 5 times normal human rate. Your neural pathway efficiency has increased by 40%. You're processing sensory information across a broader spectrum. And yes, you've developed limited emotional resonance. So I'm part Quiverian now. That's going to make family reunions complicated." "You're something unprecedented," Lyria corrected. "The Synthesis 7 didn't just heal you. It integrated Quiverian biological advantages into your human template. You're functionally a bridge between our species at a cellular level." David absorbed this information while simultaneously absorbing the ambient emotional state of the station. He could feel the distant presence of other people now, their collective anxiety and boredom and exhaustion forming a background hum of sensation. It was overwhelming and fascinating, and he really needed to figure out how to filter it before he went insane. "Okay," he said finally. "So I'm a walking science experiment with bonus empathy powers. What's the plan? Because I'm guessing your commander isn't going to be thrilled about the unauthorized genetic modification of station property." Commander Thrace issued a transfer order. "You're scheduled for transport to a military research facility in 36 hours. Lyria's voice was carefully neutral, but David felt her fear spike. "They'll want to study what you've become." Study as in detailed medical observation, or study as in vivisection and comprehensive analysis? "The latter is more probable." "Fantastic. I survive impossible odds only to become a biology project." David swung his legs off the platform, stood up for the first time in days. His balance was perfect, his strength returned and then some. "So we run. You get me to an escape pod, I head back toward human space, and we both pretend this never happened." "That's not viable. You'd be caught within hours, and I'd be court-martialed for aiding enemy personnel." "Enemy is a strong word for someone who fixes coffee makers." "Tell that to command." Lyria stood, faced him directly. "There's another option. A worse option, probably. But it might be the only one that doesn't end with your dissection or my imprisonment." David felt her determination, sharp and bright and terrifying. "I'm listening." "We contact the Joint Threshold Council. the diplomatic body that oversees border disputes and territorial agreements between our governments. We present you as evidence of possible biological compatibility between our species." She spoke quickly, as if saying it fast would make it less insane. "We argue for a ceasefire on genetic research restrictions, propose collaborative medical development, use your existence as proof that our species aren't as incompatible as current hostilities suggest. You want to parade me in front of both our governments and say, look, we can literally merge at a cellular level, maybe stop shooting at each other." David laughed, which still felt good even though the situation was objectively terrible. "That's either brilliant or the worst idea anyone's ever had, possibly both. It's the only idea that doesn't involve your death or my disgrace." When you put it that way, it sounds almost reasonable. David could feel Kale approaching down the corridor before the door opened, another new sensation he'd need to get used to. "We're about to have company." Kale entered carrying data tablets and the harried expression of someone operating on too little sleep and too much coffee. "Well, our humans up and walking. That's either very good news or a sign that everything's about to get significantly worse." He stopped, stared at David. "Are your eyes different? Your eyes are definitely different." "Are they?" David had avoided looking at his reflection, uncertain what he'd find. "They have gold flecks, very distinctive, very quivering." Kale set down his tablets. "I've been documenting your progress for the past 72 hours. Your transformation is remarkable and completely unprecedented, and absolutely going to cause a diplomatic incident of spectacular proportions when Command finds out. Lyria mentioned something about presenting me to the Joint Council. Thoughts? I think it's insane, which means it might actually work. The Council has been looking for any excuse to de-escalate tensions. The war's expensive, unpopular, and nobody's winning. A human who's successfully integrated quivering biology, that's the kind of scientific miracle that could shift entire policy frameworks." Kale pulled up holographic data. "I've been running projections. If we approach this correctly, frame it as a medical breakthrough rather than a military aberration, emphasize the collaborative potential instead of the weapon applications, we might convince them to authorize further research instead of just confiscating you for classified study. I appreciate that you're trying to avoid my confiscation. I'm very anti-confiscation as a general principle." Kale looked at Lyria. "You know this violates approximately 73 regulations, and we'll all be lucky if we just get demoted instead of imprisoned." "I know, and you're doing it anyway because of your inconvenient principles, and that oath you won't shut up about." "Yes, good. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already drafted the initial contact proposal and forged Commander Thrace's authorization codes for emergency diplomatic communications." He smiled at their expressions. "What? You think you're the only ones capable of unauthorized decisions? I contain multitudes of terrible judgment." David felt something unexpected, hope. Not his own hope exactly, but the collective hope of 3 people who decided that maybe rules mattered less than doing the right thing. It was intoxicating and terrifying and probably going to end badly, but at least they'd fail spectacularly together. "Okay," he said. "Let's contact the Council and tell them humanity and Quiverans are apparently compatible enough to literally merge biology. What's the worst that could happen? They could reject the proposal, arrest us all, dissect you, and use your biology to develop new weapons," Kale said cheerfully. "I was hoping for reassurance. I don't believe in false comfort, but I do believe in the statistical probability that bureaucrats love anything that makes them look innovative and forward-thinking. We're offering them a chance to be heroes of peace instead of administrators of endless conflict." Lyria was already entering codes into a communication terminal. "The Council meets in 72 hours. If we send the proposal now, include preliminary data, emphasize the medical applications and collaborative potential, We might get approval for a presentation before your transfer order processes. And if we don't? She looked at him, and David felt her complicated mixture of determination and fear and stubborn hope. Then we improvise, badly, with probable imprisonment. You know, David said, when I signed up for diplomatic service, they promised me it would be boring, really oversold the boredom factor. Are you regretting your career choice? Lyria's finger hovered over the transmission control. David thought about it, about dying alone in a failing pod, about waking up strapped to a table in enemy territory, about a Quaveran nurse who'd violated every rule to save him, about the impossible biology currently rewriting itself in his cells, about the chance, however slim, to turn his survival into something meaningful. Not even a little bit, he said. Send the message. Let's see if we can convince two governments that peace is more interesting than war. Lyria pressed the control. Somewhere in the communication network spanning the threshold, a message began its journey toward the Joint Council. A proposal. An impossibility. A human who shouldn't have survived, offering himself as evidence that maybe the universe had better plans than endless conflict. David felt the moment stretch, pregnant with possibility and danger and hope. So, he said into the silence, while we wait for our potential arrest, anyone want to explain why everything on this station hums at frequencies designed to drive humans slowly insane? Kale laughed. Lyria almost smiled. And in a cold research station deep in contested space, 3 people who'd made terrible decisions for good reasons waited to see if the universe would reward their optimism or punish their audacity. David suspected it would be both, but at least he'd be alive to find out.